Contact with the falling Mykentian Republic in 2007 came at a delicate time for Earth. The financial system was under strain due to the developing subprime mortgage crisis. Fleet Admiral Kossos, hoping to avoid the established military-industrial complex, contracted with small companies for supplies and munitions. This caused banks to issue loans to businesses they may not have otherwise in hopes of rapid repayment to cover already defaulted loans. Many of these companies failed. The development of interstellar colonies promised greater returns. As a result, even more loans were issued. With credit stretched to the limit, the United Earth Alliance gave in to the demands of the banks and implemented price controls. This failed to halt hyperinflation.
Yet three mega-conglomerates had emerged with no outstanding debts. In 2068, the heads of these conglomerates realized the economy was in collapse and that the alliance lacked the power to resolve the crisis. The solution would require a strong, authoritarian central government free from banking influence. They formed a consortium, gaining approval from the alliance to construct patrol craft to defend the new colonies. This was a front to allow them to construct a fleet free from alliance control. The fleet of the consortium appeared in Earth orbit, destroying the orbital defenses with ease. They then demanded the surrender of the United Earth Alliance to the Terran Imperium. While the Alliance government debated, the Imperial fleet began destroying military bases across the planet. The bankrupt and poorly organized Alliance realized it had no choice but to surrender. Raphael Gerard, Richard Carruthers, and Leon Thomason would declare the establishment of the Terran Imperium. The first steps taken by the Imperium were not by Raphael Gerard as the new emperor, but by the Consul of Internal Affairs, Leon Thomason. He would immediately implement a new currency, the Terran dollar. Backed by the gold reserves of the Terran treasury, this currency remains a common form of exchange almost a century after the fall of the Imperium. Thomason would meet with world leaders and banking executives, persuading them to transfer their debts and defaulted loans to the Imperial treasury. However, it was required that all debt assumptions be done at a rate of exchange equal to that at the time the debt was incurred. This was to ease the effects of hyperinflation by converting all transactions to the common, stable gold standard. In addition, all interest and payments on accounts had to be recalculated based on the same common basis of exchange. This accomplished, Emperor Gerard then incorporated all reserve and state-owned banks into the imperial treasury. In order to raise the necessary funds to cover this debt, Emperor Gerard authorized the formation of the imperial houses. Qualifications to become a house included proof of possessing at least 1 billion Terran dollars in assets and a down payment of 10% of this wealth. When this proved insufficient, Thomason filed fraud and corruption charges against various government and banking officials for illegal activities done under the alliance. Those found guilty had all their assets seized and liquidated, the funds being deposited in the imperial treasury. With the imperial government now firmly in charge, and the groundwork laid for financial recovery, Raphael Gerard would officially be elected as emperor by the new Convention of Houses. The new imperial charter laid out the constitutional framework for the Imperium. The heads of the imperial houses would form a convention, passing routine legislation and spending bills. A new convention of worlds comprised of elected representatives from each colony world would have the ability to make changes to the imperial charter as the need arose. A prime minister would be appointed by the emperor to oversee the government, primarily through the three consuls: internal affairs, foreign affairs, and military consul. The emperor himself was the head of the judiciary, granting him the right to hear appeals, appoint justices and chief prosecutors, and remove judges and magistrates. In addition, he held veto power over government decisions at any level. Gerard saw himself as the head of a constitutional monarchy and took the limitations of his power seriously. Confining himself strictly to judicial matters, he took no part in the functioning of the imperial government as a whole. However, as the former Director General of Industrie Spatiale, he encouraged a very pro-business, low-regulation government. This inattention to the government would come to a head in 2095, when Prime Minister Damien Carruthers was implicated in a scheme of corporate and financial kickbacks. Forced to resign in disgrace, the matter of replacing him came into dispute. The agreement of 2068 that led to the formation of the Terran Imperium stipulated that the office of Prime Minister was to be held by House Carruthers. When Gerard passed, the Prime Minister would succeed as the new emperor, and Michael Thomason, now Consul of Internal Affairs following his father's retirement, would become Prime Minister. Believing that the whole of House Carruthers was complicit in the scheme, Gerard strongly felt that they had forfeited their place in the current order of succession. Ultimately, he would prevail in the Convention of Houses, his son Hugo Gerard becoming Prime Minister. Leon Thomason would return from retirement to serve as acting Prime Minister until Gerard was confident his son had a capable grasp on government. Even though he took little part in government affairs, Gerard appeared to age rapidly. At the time it was believed it was because he took everything that happened within the Imperium personally, but the following generations showed that it was likely genetic. Raphael Gerard would pass quietly in 2102. Many would comment at the time that he had achieved all his accomplishments in the first year of his reign, and then did nothing.
When Hugo Gerard took the throne, he faced a dilemma. Fearing autocratic despotism, he was inclined to follow his father's example and limit his rule to only hearing appeals. Yet he was also aware that his father's rule had permitted the creation of an oligarchy, and in many ways had encouraged it with the creation of the imperial houses. What he and others of his dynasty failed to understand was that the emperor was meant to serve as a counter to the power of the oligarchs. By wielding supreme judicial authority and veto power over all levels of government, the imperial system, as designed, required an active, not a passive emperor. Unfortunately, in choosing to err on the side of caution, he opted for the latter and set in motion everything that was to follow.
In spite of his limitations, there was one area where Gerard II excelled, and that was in the field of diplomacy. He would achieve what everyone had thought impossible for over a century, and bring peace to the Middle East. If he could choose to be remembered for anything, it would be this, not the final, foolish mistake he made.
Hugo Gerard would ascend the throne as Gerard II without dispute. Michael Thomason would become Prime Minister as required by the Imperial Charter, but House Carruthers would not freely assume one of the three consulships. Instead, Robert Thomason would remain Deputy Consul for Internal Affairs, suggesting that anyone House Carruthers appointed to the post would need experienced guidance. Gerard was the first emperor to hold his coronation in the Hagia Sophia in Istanbul, deliberately connecting the symbolism of the Terran Imperium with the Byzantine Empire. He immediately set himself to work on a delicate matter his father had long left unattended, the issue of the Middle East. While the State of Israel had joined the United Earth Alliance and hence was part of the Terran Imperium, the Palestinian Authority had not. He undertook this under his authority as the Supreme Justice of the Imperium, seeing the situation as a judicial matter where he was a neutral arbiter. Following a suggestion by Prime Minister Michael Thomason, Gerard would propose a solution which had previously been impossible. While negotiations remained deadlocked over the matter of land as they had for decades, Gerard secretly gave the Palestinian Authority the former Mykentian colony world of Drenat, on the condition that they joined the Terran Imperium and accepted the rest of his proposal. The key to his plan was a solution to the long-standing dispute over the old city of Jerusalem. What Gerard proposed was that neither side would have possession of the city, it instead being administered by the emperor directly. Israel was adamantly opposed to this solution until Gerard indicated that they were free to leave the Imperium if they wished, but that the Imperium would not look kindly on a hostile state on Terra. Threatened with complete isolation, Israel reluctantly agreed to Gerard's proposal. The Peace of Jerusalem would be signed in that city in 2103, and every emperor after this would bear the title Lord Protector of Jerusalem. The Palestinian Authority would take possession of Drenat and rename it New Palestine under the protection of House Gerard. The death of Leon Thomason would be reported in 2105 at the age of 92. At this point, his Galatian nanites, obtained from a member of the Galatian Hunos and unknowingly delivered by his brother, Gavin Thomason, would become active. These had been programmed with a sample of his genetics taken years earlier, slowly reversing his aging over several years. He would leave Terra, working in secret from an undisclosed location to aid his family in the eventual restoration of the Mykentian Republic as preparation to face the Enmeleks. Gerard would age rapidly during his reign, attributed to the gruesome schedule of travel and public appearances he set for himself. In 2108, the Imperium had its first formal contact with the Kingdom of Solaria. The merchant kingdom sought to reopen trade with the worlds that were now part of the Terran Imperium, seeing a lucrative new market. Sensing an opportunity, Gerard welcomed the ambassadors of Solaria warmly, resulting in the Free Trade Agreement of 2109. Michael Thomason would retire as Prime Minister in 2110, expecting that his son Robert would be appointed in his place. Instead, Gerard appointed his own son Lucian to the position. While Robert had been serving as Deputy Consul of Internal Affairs, Lucian had been Deputy Consul of Foreign Affairs, which made him more familiar with the ongoing negotiations for a closer relationship with the Kingdom of Solaria. Robert Thomason would be appointed Deputy Prime Minister, with the understanding that the order of succession was being maintained. In 2112, the Imperium engaged in joint anti-piracy operations with the Kingdom of Solaria in the Capena sector. The Capenan campaign would result in numerous worlds being annexed by both the Imperium and Solaria, and would not end until 2128 when both powers agreed the area was secure. Believing in limited government in the same way his father had, Gerard allowed the Convention of Houses to grant itself further authority, believing this was the course towards the establishment of a constitutional republic. While the Convention of Houses did increase their numbers, it remained a body of oligarchs which began to enrich itself with its own authority. Gerard himself did nothing to stop this. In 2124, he would pass unexpectedly at home, unaware of the storm his death would unleash. While he was a man of peace, he would leave behind a legacy of civil war.
House Gerard's reputation of honor and virtue is pure propaganda. They had agreed to a rotation of imperial power in 2068 and then modified it in 2095. Hugo Gerard knew exactly what he was doing when he made that damned fool Lucien prime minister in 2110. I have yet to find a Gerard who honors any agreement beyond kissing the feet of the Convention of Houses.
Gerard II had secretly left behind a match which quickly ignited a tinderbox. In effectively naming Lucien heir to the throne, he had violated the trust that had established the Imperium at the outset. The consolidation of imperial power in Gerard's hands, whether they wielded it or not, could not be allowed.
Lucien Gerard would take the throne under a cloud of controversy and lawsuits. The agreement of 2068 that had led to the formation of the Terran Imperium had stipulated that the imperial throne would rotate between the three imperial houses: Gerard, Carruthers, and Thomason. The removal of Damien Carruthers from the order of succession in 2095 had led to the compromise which allowed Hugo Gerard to take the throne as Gerard II in 2102. Under the terms of that compromise, it should be Robert Thomason taking the throne, not Lucien Gerard. The reason was Gerard II and the Imperial Charter. In his will, Gerard had implored his successors to adhere to the Imperial Charter to the letter. While many believed this was intended to remind those that followed to respect the limits of imperial authority, Lucien, and a majority in the Convention of Houses interpreted this literally. The Imperial Charter lays out the order of succession. The Prime Minister ascends to the throne when the Emperor dies. The Charter was clear. As Deputy Prime Minister, Robert Thomason was not heir to the throne. Gerard would suggest a compromise, offering to make Thomason co-emperor, handling the internal affairs of the Imperium while Gerard focused on foreign policy. This offer was hindered by the fact that Lucien Gerard immediately named his son Jacques Prime Minister, making it clear he had no intention of following the prior agreements on succession. Thomason would resign his post as Deputy Prime Minister in disgust, openly stating that Gerard's succession was illegitimate and labeling him a usurper. Gerard would attempt to have Thomason charged with treason, but found that his support in the Convention of Houses was insufficient to carry this through. The imperial courts, appointed largely by Gerard II, would hold that the Imperial Charter supersedes any agreement made between houses and found Gerard to be the legitimate emperor. The matter would remain unresolved, with Thomason refusing to take part in government and sending a legate in his stead to the Convention of Houses. Before every vote, this legate would ask if Lucien Gerard was still on the throne, and when answered in the affirmative would abstain from voting. For his part, Gerard would choose to ignore Thomason, describing him as a nuisance rather than a threat. He would also wonder publicly why anyone would want the throne, as it came with endless duties but little real power or authority. Intended as a slight on Thomason, it led to questions as to why Gerard himself was holding to the throne so tenaciously. The reason he most often gave was that he feared what someone else might do in his place should they lack the same sense of restraint. He was supported in his position by the Convention of Houses, not because they felt any sense of loyalty towards him, but because the Gerard dynasty had allowed them to carve out immense power for themselves. Over the years of neglectful Gerard rule, they had turned their holdings into what amounted to minor kingdoms. Charged with the collection of taxes and the implementation of imperial laws and policies, limited as they were, the members of the Convention of Houses saw no reason to change anything. But change was exactly what was about to happen. Robert Thomason would die in 2136, making Gerard III believe the crisis was finally over. Donovan Thomason, now the head of House Thomason, ordered the fleet of his house to attack the assets of House Gerard. When summoned to explain what was happening, the legate of House Thomason simply handed Gerard a formal declaration of war, as if House Gerard was a foreign power. This was done to make a statement about the direction Gerard rule was taking the Imperium. not to the strong constitutional monarchy leading to the development of a more liberal republic, but devolving into a confederation of small, exploitative fiefdoms in a loose confederation under a weak ruler. Not grasping this, Gerard had the entirety of House Thomason charged with treason and declared their territories to be in a state of rebellion. He also formally withdrew his offer of joint rule, declaring himself to be the sole and absolute ruler of the Imperium. House Thomason would counter by openly publishing the Agreement of 2068, the Compromise of 2095, and the promise by Gerard II in 2110 that the order of succession was to be maintained with Robert Thomason as the heir. The implication to the Convention of Houses was increasingly obvious. House Gerard could not be counted on to honor their agreements. Alexander Carruthers would unexpectedly come to the support of House Thomason in the Convention of Houses, overruling Gerard's charges of treason. He would argue that as the Agreement of 2068 had been a prerequisite for the formation of the Imperium, it actually superseded the Imperial Charter, as the Charter would not exist without the agreement. As a result, he laid out a position that Gerard held the throne illegally, and that Jacques Gerard's appointment as Prime Minister was tantamount to treason. He represented a new generation of imperial nobles who saw the Gerards as stuck in the past, weak, and afraid to execute the powers of the emperor to their fullest. While insufficient to shift the balance of power in the Convention of Houses, his arguments in support of House Thomason's claim to the throne did cause many imperial houses to reconsider their positions. Sensing vulnerability, House Thomason would lay charges of despotism against Gerard, pointing out that by declaring himself the sole and absolute ruler of the Imperium, he was effectively dismissing the Convention of Houses. Seeing his support in the Convention of Houses eroding, Gerard would clarify that he held the throne with the consent of the Convention of Houses, assuring them that their powers remained intact. He would propose a series of edicts, which he characterized as reforms, which increased the independence of the imperial houses, as long as they remained loyal to the Imperium. The Convention of Houses, somewhat mollified by his stance, clarified that as House Thomason was not attacking imperial assets, it was not considered treason against the Imperium, but made no move against Gerard himself. Alexander Carruthers would quit the Convention of Houses in protest, joining House Thomason in refusing to participate in what he referred to as an illegal government. While the forces of House Carruthers would not engage in the conflict now being referred to as the Imperial War, his public support of House Thomason would continue to erode support for Gerard among the other houses. While House Thomason was scrupulously careful not to target the assets of other houses, House Gerard was far less selective, openly attacking the shipping and other assets of any house acting in support of House Thomason. Regardless of what the Convention of Houses decided, Gerard remained convinced that the Imperial Charter was the law of the Imperium and that the actions of House Thomason were treasonous. In 2138, the legate of House Thomason was assassinated prior to a meeting of the Convention of Houses. Most houses assumed that House Gerard was responsible, but House Thomason refused to pursue the matter officially. Instead, they would escalate the conflict, now occupying Gerard worlds rather than simply raiding them. The war would continue with neither side willing to back down or compromise. Soon the technological and financial advantages of House Thomason began to take their toll, while Gerard's forces became demoralized. Support for House Gerard would continue to erode, with the Emperor barely maintaining a majority in the Convention of Houses. Ironically, his position was maintained largely by the absence of both House Thomason and Carruthers, allowing Gerard to chair the meetings of the convention himself, without needing approval from the other two royal houses. Gerard III would die suddenly and mysteriously in 2140, with no officially announced cause of death. He would leave his successor a bitterly divided imperium.
Jacques Gerard wanted to be known as the Peacemaker, but a better name for him would have been the Great Ostrich, because of the amount of time he spent with his head buried in the sand. You could have put a dead tortoise on the throne, and it would have been just as effective of a ruler. His ancestors on the throne may have been foolish, but he had all the cunning and guile of a mossy rock.
My father always said that you could accuse my great-grandfather of many things, but brilliance was not one of them. This, of course, coming from a man with no imagination.
Gerard IV. I suppose he meant well. Unfortunately, he was born with the personality of a grandfather who knows the car is broken, but hasn't the slightest clue how to fix it.
Jacques Gerard assumed the throne reluctantly in a time of crisis. The Imperial War that had started 4 years earlier as a result of his father taking the throne was not going well for House Gerard. His father's intractable stance and willingness to attack the allies of House Thomason had eroded support in the Convention of Houses, and he had only gained their support to take the throne by a narrow margin by promising to quickly end the conflict. To make matters worse, House Gerard had lost so many worlds to House Thomason that some in the Convention of Houses were suggesting stripping House Gerard of royal house status. Within hours of taking the throne, Gerard would order all his house forces to stand down and declared a ceasefire. House Thomason willingly agreed to this, and negotiations would take place several days later. The terms Gerard was forced to agree to were short of unconditional surrender. He reluctantly agreed to give up the worlds House Thomason had occupied in the conflict, and in return was allowed to remain on the throne. This was not without conditions, however. House Thomason would be granted the right to select the Prime Minister, and Gerard would have to agree to whoever was chosen. Much to Gerard's surprise, Donovan Thomason did not appoint himself as Prime Minister, instead naming his son Aaron to the post. Only 20 years old, many considered Aaron Thomason to be far too young to hold the office, but Gerard promised to guide him into this new role. Unfortunately, by fixating on the immediate need to make peace with House Thomason, Gerard overlooked the true cause of the conflict: House Gerard's repeated violations of the agreed-upon order of succession. His failure to address this would anger Alexander Carruthers, who was already opposed to continued Gerard rule. Under the agreed-upon order of succession from the Compromise of 2095, it was now the turn of House Carruthers to hold the throne. Donovan Thomason would not have been ignorant of this, and in fact urged patience, suggesting that House Thomason already had a plan in mind. Carruthers would reluctantly return to the Convention of Houses, keeping much of his animosity toward Gerard to private conversation. It would not take long for Aaron Thomason to learn the functioning of government, and by 2145, Gerard was largely leaving him to oversee the government without supervision. In his later years, Gerard would admit that this was a mistake, as Thomason quickly asserted himself as Prime Minister far more than any other had in the past. Essentially given a blank check by Gerard to govern as he wished, Thomason quickly set about correcting many of the deficiencies created by neglectful Gerard rule. The Imperium had never officially been given a capital, the various government agencies relocating to wherever each government minister lived. Whenever a minister was changed, the bureaucracy would have to relocate. Thomason considered this a tremendous waste of time and resources, and advocated strongly with the Convention of Houses to fund the construction of a formal administrative capital. The Convention of Houses itself lacked a formal meeting place, having to lease theaters for every session. Even the Imperial Palace, constructed by Leon Thomason as a corporate retreat for Thomason Holdings in 2067, was rarely used for anything but official functions. Construction on the Imperial Administrative Center offshore of Alexandria, Egypt, would begin in 2147, and the capital would officially be established there in 2153. Gerard would take no part in the construction, seeing it as being outside of his purview as emperor. Aware of how young his predecessors had died, he chose to spend an inordinate amount of time taking vacations. while portrayed as a tour of the Imperium, he spent far more time relaxing than he did attending to official business. Spending only a few days of each year in the palace on Terra, he remained unaware of what was progressing. His prolonged absences would cause concern among the convention of houses, who saw his long tours and perceived lack of decorum and formality as an abandonment of his duties as emperor. This sentiment among the imperial houses was fueled by Baron Thomason, who said he had to decide many things himself as the emperor was not available or had shown little interest. As 2158 began with Gerard on yet another prolonged tour, the frustration of the convention of houses began to coalesce around a new leader who seemed to embody everything Gerard did not: Alexander Carruthers. Unafraid of displaying his wealth or station, Carruthers projected power where Gerard portrayed meekness. With assurances that he would maintain the status of the imperial houses, he promised change, economic growth, and a new dawn for the Imperium. He would soon be seen in the company of an unexpected ally, Prime Minister Gerard Thomason. Working with allies from the Convention of Houses, Thomason would quietly take the extended Gerard family into custody while Gerard was returning from his latest vacation on Tranquillitatis. Gerard's shuttle would be diverted to Alexandria as it approached, where he was surprised to find the Convention of Houses in session. Carruthers and Thomason stood at the head of the assembled imperial houses, informing Gerard that he could either choose to abdicate or be deposed by the Convention of Houses. Realizing he had lost what little support he had started his reign with, Gerard conceded the throne without protest, asking only that he and his family be guaranteed their safety.
Like the spineless worm he was, Gerard did not even whimper when told he and his family would generously be allowed to remain as guests of House Carruthers, for their own safety, of course.
With Gerard removed from power and taken into custody in a gilded cage, the Imperium was poised to enter a new chapter.
The fall of Gerard IV would herald a time when many would say the history of the Terran Imperium truly began. Yet it would not be remembered as the reign of Alexander, but that of the Shadow Emperor. Next time on Emperors of the Terran Imperium, the Architects. Alexander Carruthers establishes a new capital and palace complex to rival any other. Alexander II redefines what it means to be Emperor of the Terran Imperium. Alexander III puts honor above ambition. All under the guidance of the man so powerful, they call him the Shadow Emperor, Gerard Thomason.